Yes, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar married her own brother in order to get him citizenship. Well, yes, I mean, that's why we have Ilhan Omar in Congress bringing her very sectarian, very racist, racialist, religiously bigoted views into the mainstream of the American Congress is an incredible story, and it's about an absolutely rife form of corruption among the Somali community in Minnesota. I don't think you'll find anyone now in the West who thinks that large numbers of Somalis coming into their country massively enrich the country.
Douglas Murray just completely exposed Ilhan Omar in one of the fiercest takedowns you'll see. It all kicks off with the jaw-dropping allegation that she married her own brother to get him US citizenship, and the things he points out about it will make your jaw drop. Before we dive in, smash that like button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from.
This story has been around for a while. Quite a lot of journalists have investigated this story in the past and have come to that conclusion. Rather staggering, though it might seem to many of us, the allegation is that, yes, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar married her own brother in order to get him citizenship in the United States. She has always skirted around answering the questions about this. And now President Trump has raised it. I suspect she's not going to be able to skirt around that for much longer. There's a lot she has to answer about this. And so far, she's been able to stonewall it by just sort of neglecting to answer the investigative journalists or giving them information that seems not to be accurate. I don't know if she's going to be able to keep getting away with this now. The spotlight is so bright on her and her family relations.
Douglas Murray is absolutely right about Ilhan skirting around these types of questions. Just take a look at this clip where the interviewer calmly tried to ask her about it and she had nothing to say. It's quite telling.
Can you tell me definitively or not, is Ahmad Elsi your brother?
For the markup, we're going down.
Is he your brother?
We're going to.
Why are you so afraid to answer these questions?
You tend to think that if somebody asked you whether you married your brother, it'd be pretty easy to just say no. But apparently not, and you'll see her do this even today because around the same time, there was a huge scandal in Minneapolis involving reportedly large-scale welfare fraud tied to members of the Somali community, with reports saying taxpayer money was being misused and sent to militant groups. And her answer is hilarious. Watch this.
Somalis are not terrorizing this nation. We are helping it thrive. Somalis have always seen themselves as a fabric of this nation.
That was an interesting way to phrase it. Now, just watch as Douglas elegantly rips into her claims after the host talked about the political power of the Somali community.
Well, yes, I mean, that's why we have Ilhan Omar in Congress in the first place, bringing her very sectarian, often very racist, racialist, bigoted, religiously bigoted views into the mainstream of the American Congress. What she said there is, I mean, so ridiculous as to be laughable, that Somalis have been part of the fabric of America. They just haven't been. I mean, a small number of Somalis have arrived in recent years. And, you know, I'd love to know if what it is that they're contributing, which offsets the kind of corruption that we've just learned about. I have this test, Rita, on communities, which is, if you found out the people in your community were carrying out massive amounts of fraud, would you want to cover it up or would you want to expose it and make sure it was addressed? We learn a lot about Ilhan Omar by the fact that she doesn't think it's something that should be opened up and addressed. She wants to deflect, and that tells us just everything about her and her own honesty.
This is such a good point by Douglas that speaks to a larger pattern we see, because Ilhan Omar is not the only one who has the reflex to take the side of her community, even when they are in the wrong. We've seen this with AOC too, when she tried to defend the BLM riot violence. Take a look at this clip.
I just can't. With folks that are saying we need to stop this unrest, we need to stop violence, as though charging someone $1,000 a month for insulin that they need to survive isn't violent.
That was crazy. But in this next clip, we are going to take a look at Douglas go even deeper into the welfare fraud scandal, because there's a lot to be discussed and it ties back to Ilhan Omar. Take a listen.
The story, which was broken by a city journal, the Manhattan Institute, is an incredible story. It's very detailed, and it's about an absolutely rife form of corruption among the Somali community in Minnesota. I don't think you'll find anyone now in the West who thinks that large numbers of Somalis coming into their country massively enrich the country. You know, Somalia is a country that has been at war for years. People who migrate to the West from Somalia disproportionately likely to be involved in violence because they come from an incredibly violent and fallen apart society. And one of the other things that they bring, sadly, and some communities do bring this, is larger quantities of fraud, welfare fraud, and much more. And yes, these schemes, because there's several of them that have been exposed, including COVID-era schemes, are ones where the American taxpayer has essentially been fleeced so that recently arrived Somalis can send money back to their families in Somalia.
It is really unfortunate, but just take a look at how much territory the worst of the worst militant groups control back in Somalia. The point Douglas is trying to make here is self-evident, and there is a lot to be said about this. Take a listen to him go even deeper into the details of this whole sinister operation.
And yes, in some cases, it seems, to have sent money to al-Shabaab, which is an al-Qaeda affiliate in Somalia. So I'm so pleased this has been exposed. I'm so pleased that the president has responded so fast to it. If this was Britain or Australia, it would have probably been covered over. And political leaders would have said at best, you know, you've got to watch your language. And at the absolute best, they may have said, well, they're going to look into this and have an inquiry 5 years down the road. But this is really serious stuff, that hardworking American taxpayer money would actually be going to an al-Qaeda group thanks to Somali corruption in Minnesota. It's an absolute scandal. And of course, things like this are going on in all of our countries in the West all the time, because a lot of people who arrive in Western countries and see the huge buffet of benefits and much more that's available to them will of course help themselves to what's on offer. They think they'd be mugs not to.
Take a look at this interesting map showing the percentage of households on welfare in each state. Minnesota is surprisingly on the lower end with only 9%, and yet was still involved in some huge fraud allegations. I can't even begin to imagine all the potential misused funds across the states and all the questionable ways they are being used right now. It's a lot to take in, which is why what Douglas is saying is so important. There needs to be more accountability, but the spotlight continues to remain back on Minnesota and the community of Ilhan Omar. Take a look at Douglas continuing to shed the light.
Just last week, we spoke about the Somali community in Minneapolis. Thousands and thousands of people from perhaps the most war-torn country in the world that's been in just unbelievable civil war and strife and violence and unrest were all of the Somalis who allowed into the US, as allowed into Europe, carefully screened and individually vetted. Is there any facility to do this? Does anyone know how you screen people to make sure that they're not committing massive welfare fraud and sending money back that's American taxpayer money to people at home, including members of al-Shabaab and other al-Qaeda-linked jihadist groups? Is there any way to check of the tens of thousands of Afghans? None of them are going to go, as the president put it, cuckoo, and shoot dead a woman who's serving her country in the American capital. And I think the answer to that is no. And we should have such systems. We certainly should have such systems if we're going to bring in very large numbers of people to Western countries at this speed.
Douglas is so right. Just a few months ago, a National Guard was shot and another badly injured in DC. The exact incident he talked about. That moment hit hard because it wasn't some distant policy debate anymore. It was real people in uniform getting targeted while doing their job. Now, zoom out a bit, layer that on top of years of all cops are bad, ICE is evil, law enforcement is the enemy rhetoric, and you start seeing how the temperature gets turned way up. And in the next clip, Douglas goes straight at that idea, how this constant dehumanising talk about police and federal agents doesn't just sound reckless, it can actually end really badly.
The whipping up of hatred against federal agents who are doing their job and are enforcing the law, it's really appalling. And it follows on, of course, the anti-ICE rhetoric follows on years of anti-police rhetoric in the US. Don't forget, we're only 5 years out of the period where all these Democrats who now want to run for office are trying to pretend that they didn't claim that the American police needed totally to be defunded and that the American cops are all racists. And Zohran Mamdani, the mayor-elect of New York, said that NYPD, the New York police, have their boots on the throats of New Yorkers. And yes, it can lead to dehumanization and violence. Just look at the years of dehumanizing rhetoric about police, about ICE agents and others.
And that's really the heart of this whole confrontation. Douglas isn't just arguing with Ilhan Omar, he's calling out a pattern. Dodge the question, flip the narrative, turn criticism into victimhood and hope the noise scares people off. But when you line everything up, the gaps get harder to ignore. This isn't about attacking a community. It's about whether powerful people are ever willing to be honest when the spotlight hits them directly. If you made it this far, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and we'll catch you in the next video. Peace!